Hey everyone, welcome to a deep dive. This time we're tackling one of history's most influential thinkers.
Augustine of Hippo.
That's right. And I know.
Augustine's works can seem daunting.
Huge, right. But don't worry, we're here to help. Think of this deep dive as a roadmap, a guide through his major works.
Exactly. We're giving you a sneak peek into each one, so you can get a feel for what to expect.
Exactly. Then in future deep dives, we'll really dig deep into each work individually. But for today, let's just get our bearings. Okay.
Sounds good.
So first up, and we're going chronologically here, is Confessions, Augustine's most personal work.
More than just a typical autobiography, it's an introspective journey. He explores his youth, his struggles with temptation, and his conversion to Christianity.
Okay, so I have to admit, when I first heard Confessions, I thought, oh, this is going to be heavy. But there are parts that are surprisingly relatable, even funny.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Augustine talks about stealing pears as a kid, not because he was hungry, but for the thrill of it. It really shows his human side, you know?
It reminds us that even someone who becomes like Augustine starts out grappling with very human desires and impulses. Confessions is full of honest and vulnerable moments, ones that resonate across centuries.
Totally. And then there's that famous toll leggi moment where Augustine is struggling with his faith and hears a child's voice.
Telling him to pick up and read the scriptures.
Right.
It's pivotal in Confessions. It really speaks to the power of faith and divine inspiration.
Changes the course of his life. So from this personal exploration, we move to City of God.
Which is massive.
Huge E.
Yeah.
It's Augustine's response to the sack of Rome, 410 AD.
A lot of finger-pointing at the time. Some blamed Christianity for Rome's decline. Augustine wanted to defend Christianity.
I trust those accusations head on.
Exactly.
So he contrasts two cities, the earthly city, driven by worldly desires, and the heavenly city focused on spiritual values.
He wasn't just talking about literal cities, though. More like metaphors for two ways of life.
Right.
And in City of God, he explores everything. History, politics, war, the nature of good and evil.
Pretty ambitious. Gets us thinking about some big questions, too, like what is a just war? What are our responsibilities as citizens?
And those questions are still relevant today. Pretty incredible.
Okay, strap in, because next is On the Trinity, where Augustine dives into one of the most complex concepts in Christian theology.
The nature of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Oh, yeah, that.
This is Augustine at his most philosophical, trying to articulate the mystery of the Trinity using analogies.
Like the mind, knowledge, and love.
Yeah.
To be honest, still makes my head spin a little, but it shows how brilliant Augustine was, trying to make these abstract concepts understandable.
Absolutely. And even if the finer points of Trinitarian theology aren't your thing, On the Trinity is still valuable for understanding how Augustine viewed relationships, interconnectedness.
Okay, now we get into Augustine as defender of the faith. He wasn't just a philosopher and theologian, he was also a debater. And we see that in the anti-Manichaeans and the anti-Donatists.
He was writing during a time when there were so many different ideas about Christianity, and he felt it was important to clarify the true teachings.
So in the anti-Manichaeans, he's taking on the Manichaeans, who believed in a strict dualism of good and evil.
Right.
And in the anti-Donatists, he's addressing the Donatists, who had very rigid ideas about who could be a true Christian.
His works are interesting. They show how he approached disagreements, defended his beliefs, wasn't afraid of a theological debate.
And these debates tackled issues that we still see today. How we define good and evil, the role of the church, sin and forgiveness.
Absolutely. Still relevant.
Okay, so from defending against opposing views, we move to a very specific theological showdown.
Another thinker.
Pelagius.
In the anti-Pelagian.
Exactly. Now, this debate was all about grace and free will. Do we need God's grace to be good, or can we do it on our own?
Pelagius believed in the power of human will, while Augustine emphasized God's grace for salvation.
Like the ultimate nature versus nurture. But in a theological context, this gets to the core of how we understand human nature, our relationship with God.
Do we have free will? Do we need divine help? Huge questions.
And this debate has echoed throughout history, influencing how we think about morality, responsibility, even legal systems.
It's everywhere.
Wow, who knew a theological debate could have such an impact? So after this battle, we come to something more practical. Augustine's Sermon on the Mount.
In this work, he's offering his interpretation of Jesus' teachings. It provides insight into how to live a Christian life.
It's like a guidebook for putting those ideals into practice, right?
Exactly. Turning the other cheek, for example. He offers practical advice on how to apply that to our daily lives.
Okay, now this next one is interesting. 2 books of soliloquies. It's basically Augustine having a conversation with himself.
I know, it sounds strange, but it's brilliant.
Right.
We're getting to eavesdrop on Augustine's inner thoughts as he wrestles with huge questions.
What is truth?
What is my purpose?
The nature of the soul.
Like journaling on another level.
And finally, we have Augustine's commentaries on the Psalms. Now, Augustine was known for his speaking abilities, so it's fascinating to see how he brings his skills to these ancient poems.
These commentaries are so insightful. He doesn't just explain what the Psalms mean literally. He goes deeper allegorical meaning, shows how they reflect all human emotions. Joy, sorrow, praise, lament, and how they ultimately point to God.
So there you have it.
A whirlwind tour
Of Augustine's most important works.
Okay, so we've laid out our roadmap.
Of Augustine's greatest hits.
But where should someone start if they really want to dive into Augustine?
That's a great question. I think Confessions is a fantastic entry point, not just his most personal work, but also a gateway into his broader ideas, theological and philosophical. You get a real sense of his journey, intellectual and spiritual. Plus, it's just a really compelling read.
I agree. Confessions draws you in, and before you know it, you're pondering some of life's biggest questions alongside Augustine.
Exactly. Like, why do we do the things we do, even when we know they're wrong?
Right.
How do we find true happiness? We're all still asking those questions.
And Augustine doesn't shy away from the tough questions. He's honest and open. It's refreshing.
Totally. But Confessions isn't the only place to start. City of God is another great option, especially if you were interested in history, politics, philosophy.
City of God is Augustine at his most ambitious. He tackles huge themes. The fall of Rome, good and evil, the role of Christianity in a world that seems to be, well, falling apart.
It's really powerful. I think it has a lot to say to us today, especially with everything going on in the world, politically, socially.
It's amazing how Augustine's insights into human nature, power, the search for meaning, it all still resonates centuries later.
But before we wrap up this part, I want to remind everyone about our Patreon page. If you're enjoying this deep dive and want to support us in making more, head over to Patreon and become a supporter.
Your contributions make a huge difference. They help us continue creating these deep dives and make them available to more people.
Plus, as a Patreon supporter, you get early access to all of our future deep dives on Augustine's individual works.
You'll also get bonus content, behind-the-scenes stuff, and a chance to suggest topics for future episodes.
So if you're ready to take this adventure to the next level,
Head over to Patreon
and join our community.